During the afternoon, the Superb with Admiral Hotham, the commander of the station, came and anchored near us, and soon afterwards the Admiral came on the deck of the Bellerophon. He was received by the Emperor and dined with His Majesty. The next morning the Emperor got into a boat to go on board the Superb, where he was to breakfast. I accompanied him. The Admiral received him with distinction. The Marines were under arms, and the sailors were on the yards and on the masts. His Majesty reviewed the Marines, and the Admiral, who spoke French very well, took him to all parts of the ship. The greatest order and cleanliness reigned everywhere. Everything above the waterline was scrubbed with sand. It was marvelous. When he had inspected everything, they went on deck again, and the Admiral conducted the Emperor into the cabin, where a breakfast had been prepared with care and studied elegance, but with simplicity. The Admiral, who had extremely good manners, did the honors of the table admirably. The meal lasted a good while. When it was finished, the Emperor took leave of the Admiral and returned to the Bellerophon. The reception which had just been given him pleased him greatly. It seemed to presage well for the future. Shortly afterwards, we sailed for England in order to accommodate the Emperor's suite. At once, Captain Maitland had some carpentry done on board to make cabins. The deck between the main and mizzen masts was decorated with flags and covered with a tent. The nearer we got to England, the more ships we saw furrowing the sea in every direction. July 24th in the morning, we cast anchor in the roadstead of Torbay. The Emperor had risen early to see the coast of England. We were not a little surprised to see General Gourgaud come aboard. He had not been permitted to go ashore. From that moment, we thought that we saw clearly that something in our position was not very clear. During the day, some boats came to sail about our ship, and the next day the number was greater. The public ashore had probably learned that the Emperor was on board the Bellerophon on the 26th early. Our ship got under sail and started for Portsmouth. It was 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon when we entered the harbor of that city. As soon as we had anchored, boats of all sorts came from every side, but armed launches did not permit them to come near us. And a little later, 2 frigates came and placed themselves to starboard and port of the Bellerophon. Why these arrangements? What does it mean? It seemed as if the authorities feared lest the curious visitors, whose numbers increased every hour, might wish to carry the Emperor off. All this seemed of evil augury to us. From that time, we could not conceal from ourselves that the Emperor was considered a prisoner. We had among us the major domo, or valet de chambre, of the Duke of Rovigo. This man, who was an Englishman, told us everything that he heard said, either by the servants on board or by the sailors, especially those who had been ashore. They spoke of all sorts of things. They spoke of St. Helena, but all that they brought back was very vague. The next day, the 27th, nothing had changed in our position. The crowd of boats grew larger and larger. One would have said that the harbor of Portsmouth had become the rendezvous of all the curious people in England. No boat belonging to any private person could come near us. Launches and boats manned by sailors were constantly prowling about the Bellerophon and driving away anyone who ventured to pass the circular line which had been drawn every day. About 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the Emperor walked on the deck. Then all the boats and an infinity of small craft collected and crowded in, trying to see him. The harbor was like a vast square with a curious populace, crowds, and presses to see something that it has never seen before. At the moment when the Emperor appeared, there were acclamations from all sides. Everybody moved about and stood on tiptoe to see him better. At first, it was simple curiosity, but later this curiosity was succeeded by interest and admiration. It was easy for us to judge. The greater part of the visitors had their hats off, and those nearest saluted the Emperor with respect. Ladies waved their handkerchiefs. I saw a boat containing several officers come pretty near, and these officers took off their hats and made profound bows. At that moment, if all those people had been the masters of the Emperor's person, they would have taken him to London, drawing his car like that of a governor. One may say that by his presence alone, the Emperor had won the sympathy of the English people. On the 28th, it was the same spectacle as the day before. 29th and 30th, Lord Keith, accompanied by an Under-Secretary of State, came to notify the Emperor of the ministerial decision which deported him to St. Helena on August 4th early. The Belverfin made sail, left Portsmouth Harbour, and went and cruised in the Channel, awaiting the arrival of the Northumberland, the 74-gun ship designated to take us to St. Helena. On the 6th, about midday, we anchored at a place called Start Point. The Northumberland came and anchored near us, as well as 2 frigates and Lieutenant with Admiral Keith on board. Lord Keith and the Admiral Sir George Cockburn came on board the Belverfin and were received by the Emperor. On the 7th, Admiral Cockburn came on board and ordered a search made of all the Emperor's effects and those of the members of his suite. They took a comfortable sum from the Emperor. They seized all the arms that we had brought on board the Belverfin. I do not recollect whether the other gentlemen were obliged to give up the swords, but they did not demand the Emperor's. When the operation was finished and the moment had come to leave the Belverfin, the Emperor went down into the boat and went on board the Northumberland. He was accompanied by the Grand Marshal and 3 other persons who had been designated to accompany him. More than one tear flowed from the eyes of those of our people who had not been happy enough to obtain the favor of accompanying the Emperor to St. Helena. When Monsieur Mangot, the young doctor who had been given to the Emperor by Dr. Corvisar, had learned of His Majesty's deportation to a distant land, he had refused to go, probably influenced by the fear of losing his life on so long a voyage. Dr. O'Meara, the surgeon of the Belverfin, to whom it was proposed to take the place of Monsieur Mangot, had accepted the position after obtaining the assent and permission of his superiors.